Okay, so we are back. Me and my dad, we're going to be talking about the continuation war. The last episode was my brother and my dad. They covered the Winter War. We're now moving forward in time just a couple of years to discuss the continuation of basically the same conflict. Now that Germany was going on the offensive against the Soviets, Finland saw an opportunity to take their territory back and they moved on it. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. There's a lot of intricacy here in diplomatic relations between Finland and the Germans, and then trying to maintain their front against the Soviets and not fall to the Soviets. So I'll let my dad go ahead with a bit more of the context here.
Yeah, that was. I had my kind of recollection of the whole time between the year, what was it, 15 months of so-called I don't know how to break peace, like a mediation peace. It was I my simplistic view for that was that it was like I've always known that it was a very uneasy time for all parties, but now when I kind of look back into history books and historians' opinions and stories, it was even more so. It was 10 times more complicated. And from Finland's point of view, it was a very, very narrow corridor and windy corridor. So it was because it was not Soviet Union and Finland and Germany. It was Sweden was in the negotiations, England was in the negotiations, and it didn't happen like between Finland and Soviet Union. It happened. Soviet Union and Germany had lots of contacts and negotiations around the thing. But of course, the prevailing atmosphere in the whole situation was that nobody actually trusted anyone. So it was a dark and stinking mistrust was kind of covering the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Of course, Finland and Sweden probably trusted each other 100%. And I don't think there was much mistrust between Germany and Finland, but England kind of pushed itself into the negotiations as well, specifically in maritime connections and stuff like that. So it was a mess. And of course the whole thing was, the whole situation was, of course, to use a kind of descriptive idea that it was in the room where all the negotiations were had was lit by the light which was the color of mistrust, and the other light which was the color of starting the war. So I think I was pretty darn sure that every single participant in this negotiation ring was 99% sure that there's gonna be a war, but nobody knew exactly who's gonna start it and who's gonna do what. But it was like Finland really tried, and this is my by far my respected general. Of course, I didn't live a day when he lived, but my respected General Mannerheim really truly honesty, and his leading army leaders, we really tried to escape the war, but of course we didn't trust Russians at all, and the hatred towards them was of course practically, you can smell it in the streets. And so we tried to, and actually Sweden suggested the state union between Sweden and Finland, but Brits torpedoed that idea totally. I don't know why. I haven't, but this is It's so intriguing thing that it's. But every single one was preparing for the war. Troops were building up on both sides, eastern and western front. So both sides of the Finnish border, troops were moved. Germans were carrying troops to Vasa, which is in the middle of Finland, on the western coast, and then upper on the northern coast, Oulu. And so Finland was moving war machine to the border and having special war exercises close to the border, having tens of thousands of men already there. And the tensions were growing all the time.
So we're talking 1940, early 1941 here?
Yeah, 1940 and 1941.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, it's, as an overall fact, I would say that it's irrelevant who actually pressed the trigger first. Because it was Soviet Union. But I wouldn't blame them that much, because it was for that specifically. Of course, I will blame them for all the other things, but it was so, the conflict was so close. It was like months and months. It was so close. The situation was kind of like begging for some kind of answer. And actually, when the war then actually started, it was the answer to that freaking super narrow corridor where we all had to kind of walk. And I hate to call war a relief, but at least it started something started to happen, because it was more or less, the situation was unbearable, and I think quite many knew that it will not be solved by peaceful methods.
So how did the triggering of the war actually happen? So you've got Germany and the Soviet Union. They've made their pact. They've divided up, all these lands between them into in their little treaty. They've defined what is the Soviet domain of influence and the German domain of influence, and Finland fell into the Soviet domain, and Germany and the Soviet Union had this, kind of, whatever you want to call it, non-aggression treaty, which Germany ended up breaking in 1941, and that's when the war broke out. It's sort of to my understanding, the trigger for the war between Finland and the Soviet Union. Is that more or less right?
Operation Barbarossa.
Yeah.
That definitely was it, but it was a bit of a cat and mouse thing. Who was the cat and who was the mouse? I think Germany was a cat and Soviet Union was the mouse. But it was like, Germany played both cards. Germany played the Finnish card with Finnish government and moving troops from Baltic countries and from Heartland Germany, and from Norway, which they have conquered a year ago. They occupied Denmark, and they occupied Norway, and they were sending troops to Finland from both routes. So, but then they were negotiating with the Soviet Union about all kinds of your zone and my zone. So that the Central Europe was Germany's zone, and the Baltic and North was, which means Finland, was Soviet Union's zone of interest.
Yeah.
But still, Germany was preparing for war through and via Finland. They were building kind of. It was very close to. They never signed any kind of a paper of that, but they were together with Finnish government and Finland. They were building up a front also. So, and it was so clear there, and there were several reasons for that. One reason was that Finland had Petsamo, a very, very up northeast corner of Finland, and that stretches to the North Polar Sea. Is that the name of the sea in the Arctic Sea?
Yeah, the
Arctic
Arctic
Ocean. What
Sea.
is?
Arctic
But
Ocean,
anyway,
yeah.
so and Finland has had a major mining area in there. There was mining for zinc, mining for nickel, some and some more exotic materials. And those materials, those metals were very, very important for the war industry. And Germany saw those mines as very important for them, and they wanted to secure the Betsamo and then they would attack Murmansk, which is not far away to east. But those mines, they were very important. They wanted, and by the way, there was, I don't remember the name of the town, but anyway, there. Gosh, I don't remember. Anyway, but these mines were feeding the town in Petsamo on the Arctic Sea, which was actually one of the very few ports, actually the only port in Finland which was open year round. All the Murmansk and everything east from that, they were frozen in ice. So the maritime connection was not there during the winter. But this Lillehammer, I think it was Lillehammer, yes. This port town had a year-round open water, so, and that was very, very important for them. And for some reason, Soviet Union didn't see that, because they had huge zinc and nickel mines down south in Georgia and in Azerbaijan and whatever. They have other sources for those metals, and they kind of didn't realize that. And of course, Finland had been German-minded quite long. Actually, one of the kind of flashing aftermath ideas after the Civil War was that we're gonna have a German prince as Finnish king.
Yeah.
And all kinds of that. And our constitution, 1918, was pretty much 90% of a copy of German constitution. And so the German mindedness was there, and it had been there quite long.
And now we wound up with this. I mean, we had a choice here. We could have sided with the Soviet Union in World War II, or we could have sided with Germany. There wasn't really a third alternative. It was one of these two giant powers. And
yeah, that's very true.
And it was a bit of a which is the lesser of these two evils kind of a question. And we had this history with Germany already, and I don't want to spoil the ending here, but we managed to pull off a successful war, more or less, with a German ally, although, like you said, it was never on paper a official alliance, but effectively an ally in Germany, and we ended up not being but we ended up still maintaining a healthy distance from Nazism.
That was a very smart move, and main architect of that move was Carl Gustav Emil Mannerheim.
Yeah.
Let's not forget it. It's like the communists and some socialists have, after the war and during the past years, maybe not now anymore, but they have blamed Mannerheim of Nazism, and Mannerheim was just one fascist leader in Europe, which is absolutely bullshit.
Yeah, it is.
He was one of the main architects of keeping us away from National Socialistic party and behavior of Germany, and by far, he was. I respect the guy so much.
Yeah.
And he did it, and so. But one thing also was that Finland was not that attracted to allies either, because in those negotiations during that crucial year 40 and beginning of 41, it's like England was very brute, like blatant, to pretty much whatever Finland suggested and Sweden suggested as some kind of possibility of peaceful solution. England always torpedoed them. So they for some reason they were to be honest, now when you read all those historians, it's like Brits were total assholes. They had this British upper class attitude that you are just fucking peasants, you Swedish and Finnish. You are idiots, and we own this world, and we're gonna say you what you're gonna do. It was, and that annoyed Finland and Sweden. It was, but what can we do? What can we do? Our main target was to stay independent of the mainstream war, and but then Finland and Sweden, first actually Sweden, Sweden was pretty pissed off to Brits also. They were first who made this rerouting, so this pass through agreement with Hitler, so that German troops from Norway can go through Sweden. And then a few months after that, Finland made exactly the same kind of agreement. Okay, that pissed off Brits, of course, even more. But the reality was that Finnish and Finland and Sweden, they didn't trust Brits either. Mm-hmm. And because Brits were assholes. They had their own idea of the maritime route to what did I say? That Port City and Murmansk and they didn't listen to any other ideas. So, but then that was happened. So
were they ever worried about, I don't know, conquest by the Brits? I mean,
no. It's I don't think that was. There is a branch where I don't know Brits. I understand it that they wanted to have the maritime connection to Soviet Union because they were allied, and kind of don't give Germany any option to have that connection from Arctic Sea to North Sea and so forth. I think that was their point of view, but Sweden and Finland didn't. We were in the middle, so in there, so we didn't actually agree that much with Brits, and so we both Sweden first. Remember, Sweden first. And Finland then, a few months in between, we made the in Finnish kauttakulkusopimus, which is how do you say it, march through agreement with Germany, so that Germany can use Finnish earth connection, land connection, and Finnish land connection, and how was that? Anyway, the sea in between. Mm-hmm. So Sweden and Finland both made an agreement concerning about the sea in between.
Mm. Okay, so this turns into a hot war in 1941, right? You get the Operation Barbarossa begins by the Germans, and they invade the Soviet Union, and Soviet Union is taken, to my understanding, kind of off guard, and they're on the retreat on their front against Germany. And Finland views this as Finland, I guess, was doing this in their, well, as part of their agreement with the Germans, or their, let's call it an alliance with the Germans. They begin to advance as well, and they start to take some of the territory back that they'd lost in the Winter War. And so that's 1941, and it ends up, the Finnish front ends up being very close to Leningrad. Just 35 kilometers away from Leningrad, and arguably they end up taking part in the Siege of Leningrad. I think it's...
No, Finland didn't take part.
Yeah, I was reading about this. It seems like this is kind of a debated thing.
Mannerheim's super principle. Finnish troops will not take part in the Siege of Leningrad.
Yeah, I was reading, fairly superficially about this, but I was reading that there's some controversy around whether or not Finland should be considered as having taken part in that siege. But apparently, they cut off a bit of supply routes from the north or something to Leningrad.
Other than they gave a route, a northern route to Germany to prepare for that siege. But the northern route was like, my guess is 15%. Most of the troop movement came from Baltic countries and from the northern Middle Europe. So it was a really minor route. Although they used it, that's true. They used the railroad and so far and so forth. But there was no Finnish troops were involved in the siege of Leningrad, and that was one of the mainstreams of Mannerheim's tactics or strategy, that Finland will defend its own territory and kick out the enemy because we want to have our country back. But Leningrad was not in his plan. Leningrad has never been part of Finland, and it will probably never be.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think Mannerheim, one of his priorities was to avoid any excessive aggravation of the Soviets. I mean, he wasn't after, yeah, exactly. He wasn't after conquest of Soviet territory or Soviet cities. He wasn't after anything like that. And where possible, I think he wanted to minimize conflict with the Soviets, really, at least on Soviet soil.
And Leningrad was the real name, which is back again, of course, St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg was the capital. It was a seat of the Tsar. Tsar was living here. Tsar's huge castle was there. So
yeah. And interestingly, Mannerheim had spent much of his career in St. Petersburg serving the Tsar.
And Mannerheim respected that. Mannerheim wasn't like, I wouldn't describe Mannerheim as a hardliner Russian hater. Of course not, because he had served in Tsar's army, and in his understanding, and I think most of the Finland, we St. Petersburg was a Russian city, and that's it, giant Russian city. Yeah. We had no interest in sieging it, in taking it. No way. Yeah. The only thing what we wanted back, we wanted our Viborg back, but we lost in Winter War. And we wanted our Viborg. Viborg was the second biggest city in Finland at the time. So on, and they say that by far the most international city. Something what Helsinki is now, but it was kind of meeting point of the cultural elite and stuff. It was an international city, and there's so many stories about it. But that we wanted back because in our eyes it was a Finnish city. Yeah. And so, but St. Petersburg has never been Finnish city and will never be. So we didn't have any interest in that. And then, of course, it had been kind of I think there was a little bit of it was spiced up a little bit with that. It will be a major, taking part in St. Petersburg siege. It will be a major insult to Russians.
Exactly, I think this was definitely the wise decision going forward, because down the line we ended up having a pretty good relationship with the Soviet Union through the next several decades. So, like
when you are in fight with a guy and you are in a disco and you try to hit the same girl and and then you start chasing punches and then the other one okay take your turn, but. You may win or lose, but you don't pee and spit on that guy.
Yeah, especially when it happens to be the case that you know that this guy works in the office next to yours, and you know he has a whole bunch of really big, angry-looking friends, and you don't necessarily want the next several years or decades of your life working right next to this person to go any worse than it has to. So
win or lose, but don't insult.
Yeah, exactly.
And keep some kind of mutual respect.
Yeah.
And that is, but anyway, so the wars, when the Barbarossa started moving, Soviet Union invaded Finland, but I don't think it carries that much meaning, because we have lots of iron already on the border. So, and we had at that point we had like 45,000, 50,000 German troops. in Finland. So that means that we had like 10 divisions of German troops, and our total strength was like 56 divisions.
Yeah.
So we had a major German troop concentration already. So it just waited for the spark, and the spark happened that the Soviet Union, like in a poker game, Soviet Union's poker face crumbled first.
Yeah.
So they lost their poker face and started fighting.
Yeah.
But it had happened. It had happened the other way around as well. It's really not like in Winter War. It is very profound who started that. But in Continuous War, I don't think it carries that much meaning. Of course, there was a sentiment in Finland that we want our lost in the areas, territory, what we lost in Winter War, we want it back because it's Finnish territory.
So I had misunderstood that a little bit. I thought Finland was kind of moving with the German offensive, and at the same time, kind of taking advantage of the situation to try to get some of their territory back. I think that's how it wound up playing out. But the Soviets were actually the first to take offensive action.
It is like somebody let the mistrust. Both sides had a total mistrust. Finnish and Soviet Union. But of course, I think the motive of German troops was that they were part of the Barbarossa.
Yeah.
And so it had happened anyway. I think they had started it anyway. Yeah. So it was more and more clear that they Finland tried to avoid the idea that we were part of Barbarossa, because actually we weren't. Mm-hmm. We were sure we were riding on Barbarossa, but we weren't part of that. Of course, we took the benefit of Barbarossa what we could, but we were not part of that. First and foremost, our troops were independently led. So our officers and higher command they were Finnish guys, and we didn't ask Hitler what we do. Yeah. Then we decided certain operations we did together. So that's true. Yes, absolutely. No question about that. But it wasn't like the entire Finnish military wasn't under the command of Hitler at any point of the war. Yeah. Northern troops, we sent our northern troops in Lapland against Soviet Union. They were the only. I think we had like 2 divisions in there, something like that. And
this is a stupid question, but how many people are in a division?
4,000 to 6,000.
Okay. I have no military experience.
4,000 to 6,000, depending on what kind of weaponry they have. Sorry, I have this sinus.
Yeah, no,
but it's real life. Sinus is real life, and war is real life.
Yeah. So we're not going for anyway, studio quality stuff here.
Like Panzer division, like tank division has less men as they have heavy machinery, and then infantry division has more men because they have relatively light guns, like light field artillery or something, but they didn't carry with huge big artillery pieces or hundreds of tanks or something.
Anyway, you were talking about these divisions up in Lapland.
Lapland had I think they had like three divisions of somewhere there. Is it 4 or 3? I don't know. Divisions of the German divisions and 2 divisions Finnish divisions, 2 Finnish, and those troops in the Lapland, they were assigned to under the German command.
Okay.
That was the only exception, and there was a reason for that, but I don't know. It's a detail from this point to 2020. In 2020 April, it's irrelevant detail.
Yeah.
Although you could make a absolutely, you could make a doctoral thesis of that.
Easy. I mean, that's the nature of doctoral theses, is you dive deeper and deeper into something that fewer and fewer people care about. And
but of course, there are still these historians who have made doctoral theses around these subjects. It's still, they are, most of them are pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, I made that sort of disparaging comment about the doctoral work. I mean, it's.
But then, if you want to see a big picture of the war and the atmosphere, what led to that, and how the war was then fought and stuff like that, it was like those details doesn't have purpose.
Yeah,
you can talk about this and this and this for like ages. But the war started, and actually for Finland it was, and of course Germany, it was the first strike, what Soviet Union did, we kicked that back pretty, I hate to say easily, because there's nothing easy in war. But we kicked it back pretty fast. And was it some kind of victorious, we were drunken with victory, or I don't know, was it kind of something like that. But then when we kicked that off, so we went further on, but we pretty soon reached the pre-winter war boundaries.
Yeah, so we got our land back.
And we were so drunken with the victory, so that victory spirit and all that, we started to go further.
Yeah.
And this great Finland, and that was the time when the idea and the philosophy of greater Finland was spawned.
Oh yeah.
So and
a little bit of ego even among the Finns.
There was that. And then at some point, okay, the Russians kicked back, so we retrieved back to our old border, the pre-winter war border, and then for reasons way too complex and stuff, both sides stagnated, stopped right there, and then followed the almost 2.5 years, 2 years, 3 months or so, 4 months, so-called trench war, the stagnate, like stationary trench war. Both have trenches and lines, and there was like a kilometer or something, 1 to 2 kilometers between the no man's land, and that continued more than 2 years. So very few shots were fired in the whole 2 years.
Yeah.
Nobody attacked really either one. They were just living in those huts where were dug in the ground.
Yeah.
I don't know how you call them, but
I don't know either.
And trenches connecting them, and then they had some bunkers, some concrete bunkers, and they lived in that world. So that was a trench living, and there's lots of songs where soldiers were writing songs, and some had their guitars in there, and some were using their hand skills to carve all kinds of wooden pieces of all imaginary things, and some were carving hand tools and and all kinds of. They just started to pass the time.
Yeah. Wasn't Mom's dad there? Mom's dad, I know, was in the war.
Yeah, Mom's dad was in the war. Yeah, he was the. I don't know where he was stationed. That I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I actually asked Mom about this, and she didn't know that much either.
There is in Finnish military, we call them rättimikko, which means like the rack manager. So he was giving. He was in the rack warehouse somewhere. I don't know where he was stationed, but he was one of these guys who give out boots and jackets and pants and so forth and so forth.
Right.
And and actually guns, sure, guns and ammo. Although it's a slightly different department. I think Mom's dad was exactly in the rack department.
Mm-hmm.
So
anyway, so we've got this stationary warfare situation going on for like 2 years, and then what happens?
then the Soviet Union started to kick back. So the Operation Barbarossa was first very hard for them. I think that's one of the main reasons. Finland didn't have, specifically our leadership, Mannerheim and others, we didn't have that much. The greater Finland was, I think it was more of my idea that it was like a middle commanders and kind of in civil population, kind of the extreme right movement that gosh, now we are greater movement, we conquer the whole Soviet Union.
Yeah.
So,
Time for
but
Finland
I think
to be an
it
empire,
was
a conqueror.
strategically it wasn't our highest command idea. So we were happy that we get the old land back, old territory back, what they took from us.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely wasn't our highest command idea in the sense that Mannerheim was the highest commander, and he certainly didn't want to expand Finland into Russia. So,
like, we had been happy if we are 35 kilometers from St. Petersburg. Yeah. But if some few people, some far right people in Finland thought that, we will take St. Petersburg as well. It was not in Finnish interest, and I 100% agree with Mannerheim.
Yeah.
It has never been a Finnish city, and it will never be a Finnish city. Yeah. So, and then it was kind of the moment when the Barbarossa was still on, Stalingrad was sieged, and Leningrad was still sieged, and it was when it was kind of a recovery period. Those year or a half, for Soviet Union also. They tried to keep the Central Europe standouts. But their war industry and their military training recovered during that period, and then they started to kick back, and they started to kick back hard, and that was overwhelming for Germany. Germany totally, absolutely, the whole Barbarossa was a wrong move. What had been the right move, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's of course it's very, very obvious that Hitler and Germany, they totally, absolutely, like totally missed, like they totally made a big mistake in estimating the power of Soviet Union and their industry, and how much tanks and airplanes and how much they can actually produce. They absolutely underestimated that, so they didn't know. And then there were stupid mistakes like the climate. Russians knew exactly what the weather is, what the weather can be in there in Ukraine and all around Ural Mountains and there. So and Germans were by far unprepared. Yeah. Half of their tanks didn't start because it had been a super cold couple of days, and people were freezing to death.
It's kind of interesting that the opposite dynamic happened in the Winter War between the Finns and the Soviets. I think you and Sam talked about this in your previous episode about the Winter War, where the Soviets totally underestimated the severity of the winter that they would face while they were invading Finland. And it may have to just have to do with what kinds of different peoples live in the Soviet Union. I mean, some of them know what to expect and some of them don't. And, Stalin had purged many of his best generals, so his best officers. So they didn't have very competent leadership, and they, for whatever combination of reasons, they just didn't think ahead well enough. They didn't understand the kind of weather conditions that they were heading into.
And then I think the troops what they're sending to in Winter War, troops what they were sending to Finnish front, kind of it was affected by Russian nationalism, and they sent people from Uzbekistan, Georgia, southern Ukraine, and they threw something in there.
Yeah.
But the core Russian people from central areas of Russia, the principal Russia, they knew the weather, and they were routine winter warriors.
Yeah.
But I think that it was so mixed up troops what they sent to Finland in winter war that there was guy who had never from Georgia who had never seen snow and like that, and then there is minus 42 Celsius,
and suddenly you're getting sniped by what was his name? Whatever the
Simo How
Simo How in white dress on his skis, and you're some Georgian guy dressed in brown Russian uniform in your first real winter, and everything, all your machines are frozen and you're starving, and then you get a sniper round in the skull.
Sniper who is in his home territory. He has born there and he has hunted his whole life in there.
Yeah,
so
that was
very routine in living in those conditions, and there was nothing new to him.
That was the unfortunate end of many so-called Russians that found their way in, found themselves in Finland in 1939. But,
in Hauhas metal sights.
Yeah.
He didn't. By the way, Hauha used metal sights. Hauha didn't use scope.
Oh wow.
No, it was.
Oh, interesting.
No, scopes were very rare in Second World War.
Okay.
In pretty much all sides. Some had them, but like I think in the Ukraine front and Central Europe, Russian snipers had some scopes, but like Hauha never used scope, and most of our snipers didn't use scopes.
Yeah.
And neither on the other side is, So scope is in a war situation. Specifically in the front, if the fronts are close. So there is a kilometer or so, or a few hundred meters of no man's land in between. Scope is not, it's not a miracle machine. It's very easily, it reflects light, the glass, and so it's quite many snipers don't like it.
Right.
Of course, when the distance comes like to 1.5 kilometers or something, then there's no choice.
Yeah.
But when Hauha did most of his kills under 400 meters.
Yeah.
Most in 150 to 200. So quite close. And that is still doable with metal sights.
Okay, let's come back to 1944. So the Soviets push back and they win. They push back hard, and they basically restore more or less exactly. I don't know if it's exactly, but they restore the borders that were in place before the continuation war. They take back the territory that they had taken in the Winter War, and that Finland had now taken back, and then they just switched again, and Soviets got it back again.
We had 3 lines. So combination of trenches and concrete bunkers and those huts dug in the ground and whatever, like they were all like 600 to 800 kilometers long. Defense lines. And VK line was the most east closest to St. Petersburg. Then was the VKT line, and the last was so-called Salpa line. Mm-hmm. And we lost both 2 lines, but we never, Soviet Union never came, in the VKT line, there's pretty much after that, so like 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers after that, they stopped, they didn't go, they never reached, they didn't stop of their own will, they stopped because we were killing them. They never reached Salpa line. Mm-hmm. And because the Finnish troops were fierce fighters, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And we had Germany's support, and in 1944 it still mattered. And so it was very, very, very expensive. Mm-hmm. Of course, there was both countries, Finland Finland and Germany and Soviet Union, of course, the total craziness of war, of course, came. The human sacrifice was like unimaginable. So it was like so. But anyway, on a Russian side, Soviet Union lost. They lost like 200 something, 240 men, and Finland and Germany together lost like 65,000 or something.
In the whole continuation war.
In that core last 44 battles.
Yeah, okay.
Those super heavy battles.
Right, so it was like, what is that, 3 times as many?
About 3 times as many. And three to four times as many.
Yeah.
So, and that was a time, I think it was 43. Anyway, in those 43, 44, somewhere there, I think it was when the first kickback happened, and again Finland kicked them back, and then they took another round of we are taking that Finland idea, but the casualties were so heavy. Mm-hmm. They were actually so heavy that Soviet Union War Command, of course, Stalin in its lead, they changed their idea of occupying Finland to reach a reasonable result so that they can make peace and concentrate into Middle Europe to kick Germans in there.
Right.
Because they didn't have that much. I think Stalin and his commanders, they kind of re-asked again the question is, do we really need that badly Finland? And if we have the territory what we have now, like at the end of Winter War, so I think we can live with that.
Yeah, they've got that buffer zone around St. Petersburg now, and
they got that buffer zone. They got the Petsamo mines. They got some land areas in Sala.
They did get the Petsamo mines.
Yeah, they got the entire Petsamo.
And they got Viborg back, right?
And they got Viborg back. And they had this 110 kilometer buffer to St. Petersburg, which was acceptable for them.
Yeah. And taking more of Finland would have come at such a huge cost, because it turned out the Finns were pretty damn competent and pretty damn motivated to maintain their independence.
Yeah, and very hardly to manage. Like it's still up in the north. There is the strategic benefits from occupying Finland would have been kind of marginal.
Yeah.
Because there is not that much stuff in how they can benefit if they save the Middle Europe.
Yeah.
And the Baltic Sea ports in northern Heart Germany, and they already had Denmark and Norway, and which they lost in 45, but that's another story. But I think they absolutely, but because they're good, I truly believe in that they started to drop those pamphlets, those one-sheet pamphlets from airplanes. The Finnish soldiers, that we are the great Soviet Union doesn't need Finnish territory. Only thing what we want is peace.
Okay, I didn't know about the pamphlets.
Yeah, they spread like millions of those pamphlets. They dropped out of. Of course, Finnish soldiers didn't believe them. We thought it was political bullshit. But I think they really had that idea. They didn't have it in the beginning. They absolutely.
Yeah.
They went there to occupy Finland, as they have occupied Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Mm-hmm. That was absolutely, they had no. But they changed their mind because it was so costly. Every single 100 meters of front line, it cost thousands of men. The waste of human life was so huge that they considered it way more important to make peace with Finland and concentrate the troops back to against Germany in continental Europe.
Yeah. And that's where we wound up. We ended up with a peace agreement with the Soviets and ended up being on pretty good terms with them for decades. And as we'll talk about in future episodes,
at the end of the war, those conditions were super heavy. We really hated those, but But as everybody was so sick and tired of the worn-out soldiers, hundreds of thousands of worn-out soldiers, and hundreds of thousands of dead soldiers, we were so sick and tired of the war that, okay, let's go with it.
Yeah.
At least we have a peace. And then we can start rebuilding our countries. Same with Soviet Union had other plans also. It's a huge country. They had to start again and kick the Germans out of there.
Wait, what were the conditions of the eventual peace treaty again?
Those back to those after Winter War borders, and then, like at the time, 330 million worth of war remunerations.
Yeah.
The Porkkalanniemi, which is about 80 kilometers west from Helsinki, the 50-year lease for Porkkalanniemi, so that the Cape Porkkala, so that they can have their military base in there.
Right.
And all the Gulf of Finland islands, they wanted all of them. There's one big island called Great Island, and then maybe 50 smaller islands. Right. They wanted all those islands, and
we gave them all that.
So that's where we ended. Yeah. I think these were because they were, as I said, it was like, in that way we won the war, that we stayed independent. We maintained our own chosen path in the world, like free market economy.
Yeah.
But it was tough. It wasn't easy.
But I mean that's a big victory already, and just the difference between that and the situation of all these, Poland and Lithuania and Latvia and Estonia, and oh my God, that's a world of difference that we fought for, and
we had to sign this cooperation agreement with them, and we had to kind of lay low in the next few decades.
Yeah.
So we had to
kind of play nice with the barrel.
We finished Finland as a country and Finnish political leadership. We kind of planted the self-censorship.
Yeah, we'll get into that later.
But
episode.
That's another thing.
Yeah.
But still we won. Finland is an independent country. We have lots of landmass still.
Yeah. And
we have our independent military, and it's not bad in military. What we have today is pretty strong.
Yeah. And
so we can defend our country if somebody thinks that he can take it. And first and foremost, we are independent, and we have chosen free market economy and free democracy. A real democracy.
Yeah.
The freedom of the press is one of those elements. Mm-hmm. And so forth. We kept that, and when Soviet Union went into bankrupt in 1991, so then after that, even this self-censorship disappeared in no time.
Yeah.
And now we are really free. We can actually say something. We can criticize our big neighbor.
Yeah.
And that there's nothing bad in that. They are okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and we wound up being in the just a pretty great position where we are now. But there's something else I wanted to ask. So, one comment is, so we gave up a number of things. We won something really important, just the maintenance of our independence, which is huge. The fact that the borders on the mainland basically ended up, there was no net change effectively on the mainland. You know, we went right back to the Winter War, the post-Winter War borders. So in that sense, the whole war seems kind of just sad and pointless when the borders didn't even change in the end. But it is what it is. It came out the way it came out. So what happened with all the Germans that were in Finland?
Yeah, there was one of the conditions, like a big condition of the peace agreement was that we drive out all the Germans from Finland.
Right.
So our brothers in arms, Germans, we had to turn against them, and that's what we did. There was real battles in that war, but part of that was like, okay, we go then. Germans didn't. It was not an open war as the war between Soviet Union, because that was Germans' basic idea already, that they take their troops to Europe, continental Europe, and so. But still, they were pissed off, of course. Then, but then, Finnish army had to drive them out through the northern, very up north, through Lapland.
Yeah. So this is all this is the end of 1944, right?
45 was Lapland War, which was between German and Third Reich.
Right.
German and Finland.
Right. So the war with the Soviets ended in September, I think, goes 1944.
Yes.
And then this Lapland War starts with the Germans, and we end up pissing off the Germans a little bit. But fortunately, we didn't piss off the most important Germans. We pissed off the Third Reich Germans, and they weren't around for much longer. So I think our relationship with Germany in the long term wasn't harmed too much by this Lapland War.
No, we have excellent relations with the German now. Yeah. And Germans, their tactics in the War of Lapland, they had some bitter battles, but the main tactics was a burnt land tactic.
Oh, yeah.
They pretty much burned every single village and city. Bastards. They burned everything down. So they were really, and that kind of shows the attitude that they were so pissed off.
Right. Okay.
Okay, we go, but we destroy everything on our way.
Did they kill a lot of civilians in that process, or do you know?
That I don't know. I think no. I think they didn't. They didn't do. Of course, without a doubt, some, but
some. Yeah.
But I don't think they, because I haven't heard like war crime accusations.
Yeah.
Like that they massacred Finnish Lapland people. I haven't heard at least. So because otherwise I think that today is 2020 there would be an outcry of that if that happened. But
probably, yeah.
I think it wouldn't be this quiet as it is. I don't think they did anything compared to what war crimes happened elsewhere. Like that, okay, we will go, but we will kill you all. Yeah. Like they burned the houses and bridges and destroyed railways and railroads and so forth.
Yeah.
But I don't think they massacred people like in somewhere else.
Okay, so now we're winding down, looks like, to the end of our story. 1945, the war is calming down, and Finland is about to enter several, many, many decades, all the way till today, of relative peace and reconstruction
and it took tens of years
and getting to mind their own business and build their own political system the way they want to, and a beautiful time for the country.
The major victory, the war, I consider the war really ended 1991 when we got rid of that cooperation agreement and the Soviet Union was dead.
Yeah.
And Russia, federal Russia, rose from the ashes and like a phoenix eagle. And now it's now the border is between two equal countries.
Yeah.
And we do business together, and so far and so forth. We don't have enmity of any kind. Not that we don't endlessly love each other either, but because history has its point and meaning. So, but we have nothing. I have nothing against Russians. They are just okay guys, and the Russian. I respect and I admire Russian history and all the things what they have, like Russian intelligentsia. It's like they have lots of super scientists and composers, and they have a great history and great individuals, and as of course in minor amount, of course Finland is like fraction of the size of Soviet Union of this in Russia, but we have too, so it's
and I have just an enormous amount of admiration for all of those just people in Russia, everybody, the common people, the farmers, the shoemakers, everybody that took this whole Soviet experiment in some kind of stride and faced it with grit and made it through alive if they did, and if they didn't, I don't know, God bless them. And that's...
It was a super heavy toll in the Second World War as such. It was like the total of the war, like it was millions and millions of people, like 30 million or something, like died in that fucking war. So it's even for Russia size country, that is almost unbearable.
Okay.
But
so
today 2020 is a present day Europe, and I'm super happy that we are not warring with each other anymore.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think that's pretty close to everything we have to say about this subject right now. In the coming episodes, we're going to be talking about the post-war period for Finland and its relationship with the Soviet Union going forward through the 50s and 60s and 70s, and that's when you, Dad, were alive to experience this stuff and to get a feeling of the political climate in Finland and some of the self-censorship that was going on, the efforts not to aggravate the big bear living next door, and describe some of the political changes that were happening in Finland and the the events that led to the relatively stable and functional political system we have in the country now, and talk a little bit about just the merits of communism and capitalism and who ended up, how the data ended up coming in. I mean, this whole 20th century was a story of experimenting with different kinds of societies, heavily capitalist societies like the United States, and then these communist experiments like the Soviet Union and China under Mao, and these kind of whatever you want to call them, social democrat free market with plenty of social supports and government regulation of business and so on, these kinds of countries like Finland that wound up doing pretty well. And so we'll get into all of that in coming episodes. Anything you want to add before we close off here?
You mentioned the Mannerheim also already.
Right, yeah, we're going to do a dedicated episode on Mannerheim.
Yeah,
Carl Gustav Mannerheim, which is...
Because the guy, if you really look at his word and his life, and it's really interesting.
What a just a profoundly weird life. I mean, it's just such a unique story. He born in Finland, moved to Russia, served under the Tsar in Russia until the Bolshevik Revolution, where he rejected this Red Revolution and moved back to his home country Finland, and then fought against the Finnish Reds. And we'll get into all of that. And then he ends up being this just hero of Finland. And he, I think it's fair to say, without him, Finland would not have prevailed the way it did through these three wars really that we've been talking about.
And even guy like Stalin has admitted. Actually, the whole idea started from.
Yeah, and I remember. Here's one thing we could close off on is Stalin. Stalin could have, the Soviet Union could have pushed further into Finland at the end of the continuation war. They could have occupied Finland.
It has been hell expensive.
Yeah, but it was doable.
Technically, they could have done.
And I think part of the reason, at least, this is what I heard from you, and it makes sense to me, that part of the reason is Stalin really had a lot of respect for Mannerheim as as an individual.
Yeah.
And
even war leaders have respect to each other.
Yeah.
Not always, but sometimes.
Yeah. And so this may have been a case of just letting Mannerheim and Finland be out of a certain degree of just pure respect.
And I think one of the major components of that respect what Stalin felt towards Mannerheim was that Mannerheim kept arm's length distance to Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
That he wasn't a Nazi, by far not. He saw all that shit what was happening in there, and he militarily we needed help, and that's big. But we are not part of Nazi Germany. We are not part of Axis countries, and that's what we were.
Yeah.
So there was some reddish misinterpretation and straight out lies that Mannerheim was one of the Nazi leaders. Shit, he wasn't.
Yeah.
He was by far the opposite.
Yeah. He was maybe right leaning, but he wasn't a fascist.
No way. He kept us separate from Germany. We were cooperators. Yes, we had a mutual interest in this one big, huge front against Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And that's where it ended. So
Yeah.
And for some reason, Hitler was happy with that too. So he didn't want to occupy Finland as he occupied Denmark and Norway.
Right. So that's where we are at the end of World War II. Finland has navigated a pretty tricky situation, and as we've used this analogy, they were really walking a tightrope, and they managed to do it. They maintained their independence from the Soviet Union, and they never took part in the Nazi fascist project either. And a lot of that we owe to Mannerheim, and of course so to all of the soldiers fighting for Finland in these wars. But
and other commanders. But anyway, the Finnish soldiers and the whole nation, the people of Finland, we chose our own path. It was a very difficult path, but we chose it ourselves.
Yeah, and we wound up independent. What a beautiful outcome.
It's almost unfathomable how tricky the situation was, but they managed to go that tightrope.
Yeah,
it's one kind of a miracle, historical miracle.
All right, let's come back next time to talk about our hero. Well, yeah, one of the real heroes of Finland, Carl Gustaf Mannerheim.
Yeah, and then we have plans for other episodes too. So
yes.
Okay, thanks for listening. This is it takes a while to go through these ideas, but it's pure enjoyment to prepare yourself into that and then start talking about those and kind of analyze them as we go, and it's really interesting, and this has been a great experience.
Yeah, I would say so as well. And if our listener has stuck with us this far, I guess they're not in any huge rush, so I guess they're okay with us taking our time. Anyway, we appreciate you listening, and look forward to the next episode.
Yeah, exactly.